I knew something was off the moment I walked into my basement and nearly stepped on a rat the size of a loaf of bread. It froze. I froze. Then it bolted behind the water heater like it paid rent there. Now, I'm not some helpless guy. I'm Zachary Jensen. 38, work in commercial HVAC. I've done my fair share of crawl spaces, attics, you name it. So rats, not my first rodeo, but this wasn't just one rat. This was an infestation. And the worst part, I'd cleaned that basement top to bottom the week before. Nothing, not a single dropping. Now suddenly, I was hosting a rodent rave. I backed up the stairs, shut the door, and leaned on the wood while my brain tried to process what the hell just happened. That's when it hit me this wasn't natural. This was planted, and I knew exactly who'd do something this psychotic. Eleanor Whitmore. 50-something, bleached blonde bob, pearls at all times like she's running a country club out of her 2-bedroom ranch. She's head of the Evergreen Bluffs HOA, and she's made it her life's mission to make mine a living hell. My crime. Not asking for approved color consultation when I painted my shutters navy blue. Ever since then, it's been one petty complaint after another. Grass height, too long by half an inch, trash cans, obstructing the aesthetic harmony of the sidewalk. I once got a written warning because my nephew's toy dinosaur was visible from the street. She even tried to fine me for having a crack in my driveway, which turned out to be on city property. But rats. This was a whole new level. I wasn't going to accuse her without proof. But I had a gut feeling. And when you've lived in this neighborhood as long as I have, you learn not to ignore your gut. I grabbed my toolkit, went back down, and started inspecting. The rats had clearly been there less than a day. No nests yet, no chewed wires, but they were everywhere. I found droppings behind the dryer, one chewed bag of rice in the pantry cabinet, and scratch marks along the vent grates. Something told me they didn't come in through the usual routes. The windows were sealed. The foundation vents were covered, but the bulkhead door, the latch was undone. I always lock the bulkhead, always. That's when I saw it. A small black plastic container shoved in the corner by the bulkhead stairs, half hidden by a tarp. It looked like a pet carrier. Inside, straw bedding, and a gnawed corner that looked exactly like rat teeth had worked it open. My blood pressure spiked. She did it. Eleanor Whitmore actually released rats into my house. I called pest control immediately. No way was I letting them settle in. When the guy came out, he looked around, then whistled low. Whoever dropped these off didn't just bring one or two. This was intentional. I'm seeing signs of at least 15 to 20. Can you document that? I asked. He nodded. Already snapping photos. You'll want this for whoever you're reporting. I grinned. Oh, I do. After he started setting traps and sealing up vents, I pulled up my security cam footage from the backyard, something I'd only installed 3 weeks ago after Eleanor claimed I was hosting unauthorized gatherings, because I had a few friends over to watch the game. And there she was. Tuesday night, around 11:30. Eleanor Whitmore, walking across my lawn in a ridiculous leopard print coat, holding something under her arm. She paused at the bulkhead, looked around, opened it, and disappeared down the stairs. She was in there for 2 minutes, then came out empty-handed. I stared at the screen, stunned. I'd expected suspicious behavior. I didn't expect video evidence of a grown woman sneaking into my basement to commit rodent warfare. This wasn't petty HOA nonsense anymore. This was breaking and entering. This was property damage. This was biological sabotage. And I was done playing nice. The next morning, I marched into the HOA office, which is basically a converted bedroom in Eleanor's house, and pounded on the door. "Oh, Zachary," she said with her usual fake smile, "you know, it's not garbage day today." "You should really check the schedule, save it," I said, holding up my phone with the paused footage. "Care to explain why you snuck into my basement Tuesday night?" Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, taking a step back. "Really?" I tapped play. There she was again, plain as day. "Because it looks a lot like you trespassing and dropping off a box full of rats." She stammered something about mice and misunderstanding, but I wasn't listening anymore. I'd already forwarded the footage to my lawyer, Pest Control, and the police. "You're going to want to call your insurance, Eleanor," I said coldly, "because you're about to be sued for every cent of damage those rats caused." I walked out while she was still sputtering. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Officer Ramirez with the city police. I gave him the whole rundown footage, pest control report, the pet carrier, everything. "That's more than enough," he said. "We're opening an investigation. If she entered your property without consent and released vermin, that's criminal mischief at minimum. Could be felony property damage depending on cost." I wasn't smiling, but I felt the first real sense of relief in days. I wasn't just going to win this battle. I was going to burn the whole corrupt HOA circus to the ground, starting with Queen Rat herself. By Thursday morning, Eleanor's porch was crawling with more than just her usual collection of garden gnomes and passive-aggressive wind chimes. A squad car had parked across her driveway, and Officer Ramirez was on her stoop, clipboard in hand, knocking with the kind of rhythm that said he wasn't there for tea. I stood a few houses down, pretending to water the lawn with a hose that wasn't even connected. It was a front-row seat to consequences. Ramirez didn't go in. He handed her a document warrant or citation, I couldn't tell from that distance, and walked off with a firm nod. Eleanor didn't so much as glance my way, but her face was tight as concrete, her pearls were gone. That alone spoke volumes. I didn't have time to savor it. Pest Control had emailed me their full report: 21 rats removed, 7 nests forming, 2 gnawed drainage pipes, and a list of contaminated surfaces. The total cleanup cost, a whopping $6,800. They documented each point with time-stamped photos, all of which I'd already forwarded to my lawyer, Denise Park, a friend from my HVAC days who'd gone into law and never lost a case involving property disputes. She called as I was reviewing the invoice. "She's toast," Denise said. "I filed a civil claim this morning. We're naming her personally and as a representative of the HOA. That way, if she tries to shield herself behind the HOA's legal structure, we'll pin it on both fronts." "She won't see it coming," I said. "She won't even see the paperwork through the smoke." But listen, there's more. I pulled some public records. Did you know Eleanor filed a building permit last month for a utility expansion for her house? No, for the HOA office, the one she's running out of her guest bedroom. She requested a variance to convert it into a community operations annex. That's code for trying to make it tax-exempt. If she gets approval, she can use HOA fees to remodel her own home and call it official business space. I paused, the hose still running over my boot. "You think that's what this was about, trying to get rid of me before someone noticed? It's possible." I looked at the map. Your property line sits right along the edge of the proposed annex. If she can claim you're causing blight or health violations, she could argue you're obstructing community improvements. So she tried to sabotage my home so she could justify annexing it. Wouldn't be the first time an HOA tried something dirty. But now that she's facing criminal charges, that permit's going nowhere. I ended the call and went back inside, my mind racing. I didn't know what was more disgusting, the rats in the basement or the fact that she'd weaponized them for a zoning grab. By Friday, the neighborhood grapevine had turned into a full-blown communication highway. People who hadn't spoken to me in years were now strolling past my house with thinly veiled curiosity. "Hey, Zachary," old Mr. Lewicki from across the street called out as he shuffled by with his walker. "Heard you caught something in your basement." "Caught and released," I said. "Straight into a lawsuit," he chuckled. "About time somebody put that woman in her place." That night my doorbell rang at nearly 9. I opened it to find a woman around my age, dark hair tied up with a pencil, holding a clipboard and wearing a hoodie with the Evergreen Bluffs Neighborhood Watch logo. I'd seen her before, but we'd never spoken. "I'm Cassie Nguyen," she said. "I live on Elmwood. I heard what happened. I'm sorry." "Eleanor's been a nightmare for years." "Thanks. You here to join the class action?" She tilted the clipboard toward me. "You joke, but honestly, that's kind of why I'm here. You're not the only one she's targeted. She fined my husband for excessive leaf accumulation in November." "We don't even have trees." I stepped aside and waved her in. "Let's compare notes." We sat at the kitchen table, and over the next hour she laid out a pattern of petty fines, backdated citations, even threats of liens filed without proper notice. Her notes were meticulous with dates, scanned letters, and photos. She operates like nobody will question her because it's not worth the hassle, Cassie said. But you caught her doing something criminal. That changes everything. I nodded slowly. What if we take it further, not just her? The whole HOA? You mean to solve it? Exactly. She leaned back in her chair, tapping the pen against her clipboard. We'd need a majority vote. Over 50% of homeowners would have to agree to disband. How many homes in the neighborhood? 76. 40 votes gets us there. I can get 10 just from my street, maybe more once they see the footage, she grinned. Add mine to the pile. Let's burn this down legally. By Saturday, we'd drawn up an official petition to dissolve the Evergreen Bluffs HOA under Municipal Code Section 332, which allowed disbanding by supermajority if evidence of mismanagement or criminal activity was present. Between my footage, the police report, and Cassie's documentation, we had a case strong enough to make a judge flinch. We went door to door. Some folks tried to wave us off at first, but once they heard about Eleanor's rat stunt, most of them were ready to grab pitchforks. Wait, said a woman on Meadowview Lane. She's the reason my dog got sick last week. I thought he ate something in the yard. She planted a whole box of vermin in my house, I said bluntly. You think she'd hesitate to toss some poison around to cover her tracks? By the end of the weekend, we had 32 signatures. We needed 8 more, then the real twist hit. Monday morning, Denise called again. Her voice was sharper than usual. Remember how I told you she was filing for that utility expansion? Well, I just got a hold of the paperwork she submitted. Guess who co-signed it? I waited. Her cousin, Henry Whitmore. He's the HOA's treasurer, but here's the thing, he doesn't live here. His listed address is a commercial PO box in another county. That violates HOA bylaws. All board members must be residents. So the treasurer's appointment is illegal. Exactly. Which means any financial decisions he approved, including her slush fund for this remodel, are invalid. If we prove embezzlement, it could lead to a full audit. I stood in the garage, staring at the half-fixed drywall where the rats had chewed through. How do we prove it? I'm filing a subpoena for the HOA's financial records. If they've been using HOA dues for personal upgrades or falsifying invoices, it'll be in there. By Tuesday, Eleanor had gone silent. Her porch lights stayed off. No newsletter had been emailed. The HOA's official inbox returned a bounce message. It was like the whole operation had vanished overnight. That afternoon, Officer Ramirez returned. He knocked once, then handed me a folded slip of paper. Just wanted to keep you in the loop, he said. We're charging her with unlawful entry, property damage, and hazardous endangerment. County prosecutor wants to pursue felony charges if the cleanup costs hold up in court. I glanced at the paper. It was the official charge sheet. She could see jail time, if convicted, definitely, especially since there's clear intent. Releasing animals into someone's home isn't just trespassing, it's biological sabotage. Good, I said. Maybe the rats will write her letters. He chuckled. Oh, and one more thing, County Sanitation filed a separate complaint after we handed over the pest control report. If she's found to have distributed vermin, they'll fine her another $5,000 minimum, maybe more. It was like watching a tower of cards collapse in slow motion. Every piece of petty tyranny she'd built was crumbling under actual scrutiny, but the best part, we were just getting started. By Wednesday, we had 46 signatures, enough to dissolve the HOA entirely. Now, all that stood between us and total freedom was a public hearing, and Eleanor Whitmore was about to find out what it felt like to be judged by the very neighbors she once ruled over. By Thursday morning, Cassie and I stood outside the Evergreen Bluffs Community Center, technically a glorified double-wide trailer painted beige and lined with fading plastic planters. The public hearing was scheduled for 6 o'clock sharp, and by the looks of it, we were going to hit capacity. Folding chairs were already being set up by a couple of neighbors who'd previously avoided any HOA drama like it was a contagious disease. Now they were all in. Cassie handed me a printed list of the confirmed attendees who'd signed the petition. 46 in total, and another 7 who'd promised to show up and vote in person that evening. Every box was checked, every signature verified. We had double-checked the municipal disbandment code. Nothing could stop us now unless someone tried to pull a last-minute stunt. And based on what Denise had uncovered about the HOA's financial trail, we weren't ruling anything out. I glanced at my phone. No response yet from the county clerk's office. Denise had filed a motion to freeze the HOA's bank account pending audit, and we were waiting on confirmation that it had gone through. If Eleanor tried to drain the funds before the hearing, we needed to stop it cold. Cassie leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "You think she'll even show?" she asked. "She will," I said. "She won't be able to help herself." And I was right. At exactly 5:58, Eleanor arrived in a dark green sedan I'd never seen before. Her usual polished exterior was gone. She wore oversized sunglasses, a wrinkled cardigan, and her hair was pulled back in a makeshift bun. No pearls, no clipboard. Just a woman forced to walk into a room full of people who'd had enough. The moment she stepped inside, conversations dropped. All eyes followed her as she took a seat in the back row. Alone. The meeting opened with Council Liaison Edward Mendez, a city-appointed official who'd been brought in to oversee the disbandment vote. He was a tall man in his 40s with a calm, bureaucratic tone that could probably lull a courtroom to sleep, but today, his presence was critical. He was here to ensure the process was legitimate and legally binding. "Thank you all for coming," Edward began. "We are here to conduct a formal vote under Municipal Code 332, subsection E, concerning the dissolution of the Evergreen Bluffs Homeowners Association. We have verified that a qualifying petition has been submitted with the required number of signatures. A public vote will now be held. Before the ballots were passed out, Edward opened the floor for statements. I stood up first. "My name is Zachary Jensen," I said, scanning the room. "Most of you know me. I've lived here for over 7 years. I'm not going to waste your time repeating what you already know. But I will say this, what happened to me could have happened to any one of you. I caught someone using HOA authority to target a homeowner with criminal actions. Not pettiness, not a fine over weeds. Real, prosecutable crimes. That's not oversight, that's abuse of power, and if we don't shut this down now, it'll keep happening." Cassie stood next. "I'm Cassie Nguyen, and I've collected over 20 first-hand accounts of financial irregularities, illegal citations, and threats that never followed proper channels. This HOA isn't protecting our property values. It's being used as a weapon by a few people who think they're above the rules. We can't let that continue." She sat down. No one else rose to speak until Eleanor slowly stood. "I admit mistakes were made," she said. Her voice was hoarse but composed. "But I did what I did because I care. I wanted this community to stay beautiful, orderly. I never intended for things to go this far." Someone in the second row muttered, "You released rats." Eleanor ignored it. "I understand that emotions are high, but dissolving the HOA isn't the answer. You'll regret it when the neighborhood falls apart. Just remember who pushed for this when your property taxes go up and your streets fall into disrepair." She sat down without looking at anyone. No applause, no nods of agreement, just silence. Edward cleared his throat and moved on. "Ballots will now be distributed." The process took 20 minutes. One by one, people cast their votes and dropped them in the sealed box at the front. No one made eye contact with Eleanor as they passed her. When Edward finally opened the box and tallied the votes, he didn't even blink. 58 votes in favor, 2 opposed. The motion to dissolve the Evergreen Bluffs Homeowners Association is hereby approved, effective immediately. Someone in the back clapped once, then stopped, then another joined in. Within seconds, the whole room erupted in cheers, not rowdy, just relieved. Like a weight had been lifted, none of us realized we were still carrying, but we weren't done. As the crowd dispersed, Denise arrived. She had a manila envelope in one hand and a deputy from the county sheriff's office walking beside her. She made a beeline for Edward. "The court approved the injunction," she said. "We've frozen the HOA's bank account and we're initiating a financial audit. We have reason to believe that over $20,000 in community funds were misappropriated for personal home renovations under falsified invoices." Edward raised his eyebrows. "Have those been filed with the district attorney?" "The DA's office received copies this morning," Denise said. "They're reviewing it for criminal fraud charges." The deputy stepped forward and addressed Eleanor directly. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. You're not under arrest at this time, but we have a warrant to search the premises of your residence and seize any records pertaining to HOA financial activity." For the first time, Eleanor looked genuinely stunned. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She slowly stood and followed the deputy outside without a word. The green sedan remained parked and forgotten, with the HOA officially dissolved and a criminal investigation unfolding. The neighborhood transformed in ways none of us expected. The following week, a group of residents, including Cassie, myself, and a few retired folks with time on their hands, formed a voluntary neighborhood council. Not a governing body, no fines. Just people coordinating trash pickup days, recommending local contractors, and sharing updates about when the city was repaving the roads. Everything the HOA claimed to do without any of the nonsense. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, not from Eleanor, from the county prosecutor's office. It stated that formal charges had been filed against Eleanor Whitmore for unlawful entry, biohazard endangerment, and financial fraud. The rats were only the beginning. The audit uncovered falsified invoices for landscaping services that were never performed, a security system upgrade that turned out to be a new home theater, and thousands paid to a contractor who turned out to be her nephew, unlicensed and unregistered. The prosecutor was pushing for a trial date within the next 3 months. If convicted, she faced up to 6 years in state prison. Cassie and I met for coffee the day the news broke. We sat outside the local cafe, watching a group of middle schoolers ride their bikes past the now empty house Eleanor used to dominate from like a throne. "She's not coming back here," I said. "Even if she does," Cassie replied. "She's got no power left." I raised my cup. "To rats. The most effective whistleblowers we never asked for," she laughed. "And to neighbors who finally said enough." Later that night, I stepped into my basement, clean, dry, pest-free. The traps were gone. New insulation lined the walls. The whole place smelled like cedar and fresh paint. I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in, not just a clean basement, but a clean slate. No more anonymous letters. No more surprise inspections. No more fake fines taped to the door with smug serif fonts. Evergreen Bluffs had survived the infestation. Not just the rats, the real one too. And now, for the first time in years, it actually felt like home. A week after the hearing, the Evergreen Bluffs community was already transforming. Without the HOA's shadow looming over every porch light and mailbox color, neighbors had started to relax in ways I hadn't seen in years. People left their trash cans out overnight without worrying about citations. Kids chalked up sidewalks without being accused of vandalism. Even the elderly couple on Cedar Hollow finally put out their vintage lawn flamingos, something they hadn't dared since Eleanor's first term. But despite the calm on the surface, there was still unfinished business beneath it all. While the HOA had been dissolved, and Eleanor was facing criminal charges, something about the way she had operated so confidently, so recklessly nagged at me. People like her didn't act that bold without believing they had cover. Denise had already uncovered financial wrongdoing, but I had a feeling we hadn't touched the bottom yet. I called Cassie and asked her to meet me in what used to be the HOA's office, that is, Eleanor's former guest bedroom. The house had been locked up since the search warrant was executed, but the county had granted temporary access to us as part of the audit committee. Edward Mendez had overseen the transfer of keys earlier in the week, and tonight was our turn to dig through what the sheriff's office hadn't already seized. Cassie arrived with a flashlight and a backpack full of gloves, zip bags, and a portable scanner. We weren't taking chances. Inside, the room still smelled faintly of lavender plug-ins and old printer toner. The desk was empty except for a dusty mug that read "Leadership isn't given, it's earned," and a stack of HOA newsletters dating back almost a decade. Cassie started on the filing cabinets while I pulled open the closet. Behind the usual clutter, folded chairs, outdated banners, a dusty box of community guidelines booklets, I spotted something wedged between the wall and a stack of binders. It was a narrow plastic container, the kind used for storing paperwork or receipts. I pulled it out and popped the lid. Inside were nearly 50 envelopes, all with different names on them. Some sealed, some not, all addressed to the HOA's post office box. Each one had a check attached. I handed one to Cassie. "These aren't from dues. Look memo line," she squinted. "Pest control reimbursement, emergency drainage repair. These aren't part of any approved budget." I sifted through them. Different homeowners. All written out to Evergreen Bluffs Management instead of the HOA itself. "She created a shell name," Cassie muttered. "This wasn't just mismanagement. This was laundering." We gathered the envelopes into a sealed evidence bag and documented everything with Denise the following morning. She submitted it to the DA's office, and within 2 days, the fraud case expanded. What started as a case of property sabotage and embezzlement had evolved into felony-level financial misconduct, spanning 3 years and involving over $60,000 in misappropriated homeowner funds. Eleanor's court date was moved up. Denise requested that I testify, not just as the initial complainant, but as a witness to the broader pattern of abuse. I agreed. I wanted the record to reflect every inch of the damage she'd caused, not just to me, but to the entire neighborhood. The trial began on a humid Monday morning at the county courthouse. The gallery was packed local reporters, neighbors, even a few former HOA board members who'd quietly resigned before things got ugly. Eleanor sat at the defense table looking hollow. Her hair was unstyled, and she wore a plain gray suit that looked 2 sizes too big. Her lawyer, a curt man with a thinning comb-over, did all the talking. When I was called to the stand, I kept my testimony clear and detailed. I explained the rat incident, the property damage, the security footage, and how it tied into a broader scheme of harassment and manipulation. Then I described what Cassie and I found in her house: the hidden checks, the shell organization, the false invoices. The prosecutor followed up with Denise's audit results, which painted a damning picture. Eleanor had used HOA funds to pay herself through fake maintenance companies, including one registered under her cousin's name, the same cousin who illegally served as HOA treasurer without ever living in the neighborhood. They even uncovered a consulting fee paid to a non-existent landscaping firm, which turned out to be deposited into an account Eleanor controlled directly. One of the most powerful moments came when a soft-spoken, elderly neighbor named Mrs. Randall was called. She described receiving a letter from Eleanor 3 years earlier demanding payment for urgent pest removal and threatening a lien if she didn't comply. She paid nearly $900 money she'd pulled from her emergency savings. The pest problem, turns out it had never existed. By the 3rd day, the courtroom atmosphere had turned. The defense tried to argue that Eleanor's errors were clerical, that she had been overwhelmed and misguided, not malicious. But the evidence was too overwhelming. From the forged contractor signatures to the hidden bank statements, from the rats in my basement to the fake permits, this wasn't mismanagement. It was a calculated operation. The jury took less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts: criminal mischief, felony property damage, fraudulent misrepresentation, and financial exploitation. The judge sentenced Eleanor to 6 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 4. She was also ordered to pay restitution to affected homeowners, including me and Mrs. Randall, and barred from serving on any residential board or holding fiduciary responsibility in any community organization. As she was led away in cuffs, she didn't look at anyone. Not at me, not at Cassie, not even at the judge. Her reign was over and she knew it. In the weeks that followed, Denise helped the community set up a claims process so neighbors could recover lost funds. The restitution pool was funded by the seizure of Eleanor's personal assets, her car, her home equity, and what little remained in the Evergreen Bluffs management account. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Enough to help people repair, repaint, and move forward. Cassie and I were asked to chair the voluntary community council. We accepted but made it clear: no fines, no enforcement, no authority, just neighbors helping neighbors. Every meeting was open door. Every decision was made collectively. People actually started attending for once. not to complain, but to contribute. The house Eleanor once lived in was sold at auction and bought by a young couple expecting their first child. They planted a lemon tree in the front yard where Eleanor's "No Loitering" sign used to stand. A small change, but symbolic. One evening, I stood in my basement again, fully restored. The drywall was patched, pipes replaced, and I'd even installed a small wine shelf where the rat carrier had once been left. It was quiet now, not just in the room, but in my mind. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder every time I trimmed my hedges or parked a little crooked. Cassie dropped by with a bottle of red to celebrate the end of everything. "Hard to believe it's all over," she said, handing me a glass. I raised mine. "Not over, just finally right." We sat outside as the sun went down, watching the neighborhood breathe a little easier. Dogs barked without fear of fines. Kids laughed without being told to quiet down. For the first time in a long time, Evergreen Bluffs was a neighborhood again, not a dictatorship. Eleanor tried to control a community with fear. But in the end, it was the truth and a few rats that tore her empire down. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been sealed, notarized, and delivered to every single doorstep.